Hello, I'm James Sproule. I'm Chief Economist here at the Institute of Directors. This month I'd like to do something a little bit different. Today's headlines make it very, very easy to be very pessimistic about a lot of things, whether it's the budget deficit, Europe, the environment, inequality, a whole host of things that the pessimists can really, really sink their teeth into. But I'd like to take a different tack. I'd like to be a bit optimistic. The former head of the Institute of Ideas had a famous quip, and that was that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. I think that's absolutely right. If we look at one of the biggest technological changes we've had in the last few decades, it's been Moore's law. That's the law that states that computing capacity doubles every 18 months. And normally when one of these sort of things happen, it goes on for maybe 2, 4, 6, 8 years. But this has been going on for decades. And really, really it's making a huge difference to the way which we see computers and technology affecting all of our lives. But I don't even think that's the most important thing. The most important thing about what's happening is that a lot of times technology is like electricity. If we remember when electricity was developed, of course, it was all about making factories more efficient. But in fact, of course, electricity now permeates all of our lives. And the way in which electricity has come to dominate our lives and become really impossible without that is the exact same way that technology is going to be moving. Technology is extremely important. But it's the way in which that technology is impacting our lives and the way in which it's incorporated into more and more of the way that we do things, which starts to become really, really critical. If we look at something like Uber, a lot of people might say, well, Uber's putting a lot of taxi drivers out of business. But of course, what it's also doing is changing the landscape entirely. And the way that landscape is now changing is more people are using those cars. So more people are using the taxis, which has impacts upon our environment, impacts upon the way in which people own cars, impacts upon the way in which people commute around our cities. Huge, huge impacts. It's really, in some ways, impossible to tell what the final destination is going to be, but we know that the destination is probably going to be a much, much better one in the longer term. If we can look at another technological innovation, for instance, Instagram. Instagram, of course, employed 13 people, and it put Kodak, which employed 140,000 people, out of business. Now, on one hand, you might think, well, this is terrible because, of course, lots of people are losing their jobs. But of course, what it's really doing is changing the way that we all use media in the future. We don't need to preserve businesses that people no longer want to support. We need to get behind the way in which technology itself is changing. All of us now use more photographs in our reports, more photographs in everything from our websites, etc. All of that's possible because of the way that photography has changed full stop. And there's no point in trying to preserve a company who's no longer supplying a service that we as consumers want. I think it's very, very easy to sit there and get very nervous about all of these things, but actually I'm extremely optimistic. I'm optimistic about the way in which people use technology. I'm optimistic about the way in which many more people are incorporated into learning about new businesses and pushing forward businesses and new boundaries and new technologies. And that's what makes me think that all the change that we're facing is much more opportunity than it ever is going to be a threat. I hope you think so as well. Thanks very much.